It was 3 a.m. when a woman in pink slippers pounded on my cabin door screaming I was trespassing. Then she called 911. On me. Asterisk what she didn't know. I wasn't just staying on that land. I own it. Not just the cabin. Not just the lake. I own the entire county. Asterisk and when the cops showed up, let's just say, Queen Karen's empire crumbled fast. It was exactly 3 a.m. when the banging started. Bang. 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 Not a polite knock, not a hesitant tap, just loud, urgent pounding that rattled the front door of my lake cabin like someone was trying to break in. My heart jumped to my throat. In the dead silence of the woods, it sounded like a gunshot. Max, my loyal German shepherd, was up before me, snarling, hackles raised, body rigid with instinct. He stood like a soldier between me and the front door, barking so loud I could hardly hear myself think. That dog didn't even bark at deer anymore, so whatever was on the other side wasn't a raccoon or a curious hiker. Still half asleep, I swung my legs off the couch where I dozed off after a late-night fishing session. I grabbed my flashlight and slipped on a hoodie, heart pounding with the kind of adrenaline that makes your hands shake without knowing why. Outside, the wind rustled through the tall pines, the lake glistened under the moonlight, and then the pounding came again. Bang. 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 I took a deep breath and opened the door. And there she was. Karen. Now, I didn't know her name yet, but everything about her screamed it. The kind of woman who treats her HOA position like a royal title and believes trespassing means standing in the shade of her tree. She was in her late 50s, wrapped in a fluffy pink bathrobe that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks, her hair in hot rollers, and slippers on like she just stormed out of a suburban sitcom. But the most ridiculous part? She wasn't holding a flashlight. She wasn't checking to see if someone was in danger. She had her phone out, finger hovering dramatically over the 911 button. And she was fuming. "You!" she shouted like I just kicked her mailbox over. "You are not allowed to be here. You're trespassing on private HOA property. No overnight stays. That's in the community rules." I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" Her eyes narrowed. "You heard me. This land belongs to the Lakeside Serenity HOA. You need to vacate immediately. I'm calling the authorities." I was confused at first. Maybe she was lost? Sleepwalking? Had too many glasses of boxed wine? But then I saw the look in her eyes. Not confusion, not fear. Power. Entitlement. She genuinely believed she had the authority to walk onto my land in the middle of the night and demand that I leave. I raised a brow and tried to stay calm. "Ma'am. This is my property. I've owned this cabin for years. This is privately deeded land." She scoffed, like I had just told her I owned the moon. "That's what they all say," she snapped, holding up her phone like a badge of justice. "You don't look like you belong here." Wow. That one landed. I took a slow breath. "Lady, you've made a big mistake. You're standing on my porch, screaming at the legal owner of this land. You might want to take your finger off the call button." But she didn't. Instead, with a smug little smile that made my blood boil, she pressed it. 911. "Hello? Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser at Lakeside Serenity. Yes, he's refusing to leave the property. He's aggressive and has a dog with him. I'm afraid for my safety," she said, adding extra drama to her voice like she was auditioning for a Lifetime movie. I was stunned. This woman just lied to the cops, in real time. About me. While on my property. Max was still barking, and I told him to stay, though I half wished he'd just scare her off. I knew better than to lose my cool. But inside, I was boiling. She had no idea who she was dealing with. This wasn't just another HOA busybody threatening me over lawn length or mailbox colors. No, this was the Queen of Karens. The type who thinks every tree branch belongs to her. The type who weaponizes authority even when she has none. And now she was trying to use the police to kick me out of my own cabin, on land I had personally purchased with cash, free and clear. She had no clue about the truth. That not only did I own the cabin, not only did I own the surrounding woods, but I owned the entire stretch of land their little HOA backed into. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a war declaration, and Karen had no idea that she just tried to fight a bear with a water pistol. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her lie to the dispatcher, and said quietly to myself, "She's going to regret this." Let me rewind just a bit. My name's David Grant, 42 years old. Semi-retired, financially independent, and a man who likes his peace and quiet. I wasn't always this laid back. In fact, I used to work 80-hour weeks as a commercial real estate analyst in Dallas. It was grueling, cutthroat, and stressful, but it taught me the most important thing in life: owning land is power. Over a decade ago, I started investing in rural properties, first small plots, then larger tracts of undeveloped land. I learned to read county maps like novels and spotted undervalued areas before the developers did. And one day, a listing popped up that changed everything: a 2,500-acre swath of lakefront property, complete with a rustic cabin, winding trails, and forest so thick it swallowed sound. I drove out the next morning and stood at the edge of that lake with nothing but the wind, the water, and the thought, this is mine now. No city traffic. No phone reception. Just the wild, unbothered silence of nature. It was worth every penny. Now here's where the story takes a turn. About 5 years before I bought it, the previous landowner leased out a small portion of shoreline to a newly built HOA development called Lakeside Serenity Estates. Cute name, right? Think cookie-cutter luxury homes with matching mailboxes, quarterly dues, and an obsession with rules that would make a prison warden blush. When I acquired the full property, their lease technically expired. But after reviewing their original contract, I decided to let them stay on a goodwill extension. Why? Because I don't like chaos, and evicting a bunch of families from land they built on would have made me the villain. So, I made it simple. I drafted an agreement and sent it to their HOA board. They could continue to use their current lots under a silent renewal, provided they didn't expand, didn't interfere with any other parts of my land, and respected my boundaries, physical and legal. For years, it worked. The HOA stuck to its bubble, and I enjoyed my weekends in peace at the cabin. Until Karen Richardson showed up. She moved into Lot 7 about a year ago and instantly declared herself acting HOA president. Emphasis on acting, because the title was self-appointed after the previous board moved away. She ran that little suburban kingdom like she was Queen Elizabeth with a clipboard. At first, it was mildly amusing. I got letters with HOA headers saying things like, "Your cabin structure violates community color schemes. Lake activity must cease by 8 p.m. due to noise policy. No off-leash dogs allowed near community trails." Mind you, I don't even live in their community. I never signed anything. My land was separate, private, and exempt from HOA rules. Always had been. Always will be. So I tossed the letters in the trash, poured another coffee, and went fishing with Max. But Karen wasn't the type to let things go. Soon she escalated. She sent certified mail. She taped notices to my gate. She even stood at the trailhead one afternoon, wagging her finger at a group of teens for trespassing when I'd personally invited them to hike. I politely called her once and reminded her of the boundary agreement. She acted cordial. Apologized even. Said it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Just last month, I found a bright orange violation notice posted to my cabin door, accusing me of unauthorized dock usage and threatening a fine of $500. I laughed out loud. There's only one dock on this side of the lake, my dock. But Karen? Oh, she was doubling down. She began referring to my portion of the lake as common use water, citing some clause from their HOA bylaws, which didn't apply to me at all. It was like watching someone quote monopoly rules in a real estate deal. Then came the emails. Dozens of them. Subject lines like, urgent, dock repainting required, community access meeting reminder, unapproved campfires observed on East Shore. I ignored every single one. It was clear by now, Karen had rewritten the narrative in her mind. She genuinely believed that if she just said it enough times, she could claim ownership over land that had nothing to do with her. Her ego was bloated by decades of unchecked authority over mailbox colors and pet leash lengths, and now she wanted to expand her empire. Then came the final straw, the 3 a.m. knock on my door. She showed up in pink slippers like the Queen of England, barking orders and threatening to call the cops because I had dared to sleep in my own cabin, on my own land, without HOA authorization. That was the moment I realized something important. This wasn't just HOA overreach. This was a full-blown power trip, and Karen was about to learn the hard way that when you challenge a landowner on his own soil, you'd better come prepared. Because I wasn't just some squatter. I was the landlord of her entire kingdom. 15 minutes after Karen made her dramatic 911 call, the silence of the woods was shattered by the distant hum of tires on gravel. Then red and blue lights flickered through the pine trees, flashing across the walls of my cabin like a warning siren from the heavens. Max, still on edge, stood at attention, ears perked as the cruiser pulled up. The piece of the lakefront was now a stage for a midnight showdown. 2 county deputies stepped out of the vehicle, their expressions flat and tired. One rubbed sleep from his eyes while the other looked like he was running on his 3rd cup of bad gas station coffee. Clearly, this wasn't their first Karen call of the week. Karen leapt into action like a stage performer on opening night. "There. Officers. That's him." She barked, jabbing a finger at me like I'd committed grand theft cabin. "He's squatting on HOA property. He refuses to leave. He's threatening me with that dog." Max let out a single bark, as if to say, "Who, me?" The taller of the 2 deputies, a man in his early 50s with a no-nonsense look, turned to me with a sigh. "Sir, do you have any identification?" I nodded, calm as ever. "I've got more than that." I turned around, walked back into the cabin, and grabbed the folder I always kept in my safe, the one with all the deeds, permits, land surveys, and boundary maps for my property. Because when you own 2,500 acres, you don't leave anything to chance, especially not with an HOA queen trying to annex it by attitude alone. I returned to the porch and handed the folder to the officer, flipping it open to the official title deed. "This isn't just for the cabin," I said, locking eyes with Karen. "This covers everything. The cabin, the lake, the surrounding woods, even the road you drove up on." The 2 officers flipped through the documents. Their eyes scanned the pages in silence, the flashlight beams flickering across legal descriptions and signatures. I saw their eyebrows rise halfway through. Then came the chuckle, low, surprised, and just a little bit impressed. "Well," said the older deputy, glancing over the pages, "looks like this land doesn't belong to the HOA at all. It belongs to Mr. Grant here. Including the lake access. Including the trails." He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this entire area is private land. His private land." Karen's jaw opened and closed like she'd just swallowed a wasp. No, that can't be," she stammered, stepping forward. "The HOA has jurisdiction here. We have a map. The lake is community use. It's in the bylaws." The deputy shook his head. "Your bylaws don't override county property records. This man is the legal owner. If anything, your HOA is operating on land you're leasing, which means you're the guest here." Her face drained of color. "But he was making noise. There were campfires. That's against our noise ordinance." That was her next angle? Noise complaints? "Ma'am," the deputy said, sterner now, clearly tired of the drama, "this cabin is outside city limits. County noise regulations don't apply unless there's a disturbance to neighbors, which in this case would be you, trespassing at 3 a.m. Karen opened her mouth again, but he cut her off. "And before you file any more complaints, let me make this clear. Calling 911 on a legal landowner, at his private residence without cause, and lying about feeling threatened, can be considered a false police report. That's a chargeable offense." The other officer chimed in, arms crossed. "You woke us up, dragged us out here, and wasted county resources. Next time, make sure you're standing on land you actually have rights to." And just like that, the air deflated from Karen's balloon of self-righteousness. Her hand trembled as she tried to pull up something on her phone, a map, a clause, a message from the HOA board, but it didn't matter. The truth was written in black and white, held in the deputy's hands. Her phone slipped from her grip and clattered to the porch. She didn't even pick it up. She just stood there, blinking like she was waiting to wake up from a bad dream. I gave a small shrug and said, "Next time you want to challenge someone's property rights, maybe check who signs the checks in this part of the county." Max sat beside me, tongue out, looking like he just won the Neighborhood Watch Award. The deputies handed me back my documents and nodded. "We're done here, sir. Sorry for the trouble." "Not at all," I replied. "You were doing your job." She was not. Karen didn't say a word as she slowly turned and walked back toward the road, her slippers crunching across gravel. But I knew this wasn't over. Karen had just been publicly humiliated, and people like her? They don't quit. They plot. The next morning, I did what I should have done months ago. No more ignoring it. No more patience. No more benefit of the doubt. I put on my boots, grabbed my briefcase, and headed straight for the HOA clubhouse, the same little beige building with fake shutters and members-only sign that Karen treated like her personal throne room. Funny thing? The clubhouse sat directly on my land. They had a temporary lease that had expired 2 years earlier. I'd let it slide because the community had never caused trouble before. But now, it was time to remind them whose name was on the deed. I pulled into the small circular driveway at 9:30 a.m. sharp. A few early bird residents were already trickling into the building, holding clipboards and coffee cups, dressed like they were headed to a bake sale rather than a board meeting. Karen, in full command mode, spotted me the moment I stepped out of my truck. She stomped across the parking lot, hands waving like she was trying to direct airplane traffic. "You can't be here," she barked, trying to block the door like a mall cop. "This is a private HOA meeting. You're not authorized to speak." I didn't even flinch. Instead, I pulled the deed from my case and held it up like a courtroom exhibit. "Actually," I said calmly, "I'm the only one authorized to be here. This clubhouse is on my land. Every inch of it. And as the legal property owner, I'm calling an emergency community meeting. Right now." She opened her mouth to argue, but several residents nearby were already turning to listen. Some of them looked confused. Others looked concerned. And one elderly man muttered, "Wait, the clubhouse is on his land?" I stepped inside and walked straight to the podium at the front of the room, where a big whiteboard still had monthly budget discussion written in blue marker. I uncapped a fresh one and scribbled over it with something new: notice of immediate land use termination. By the time the room had filled with about 25 residents, the energy had shifted. Karen was pacing in the back, red-faced, arms crossed. The rest were whispering to each other, curious, unsure, maybe a little afraid they'd been left in the dark. I cleared my throat and spoke clearly, slowly. "My name is David Grant. Many of you know me as the guy with the cabin on the lake. But what most of you probably don't know is this." I held up the survey map from the folder. "I am the legal owner of all land extending from the southern trailhead, across the lakefront, through the woods, and including this building." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. "Your HOA was originally granted a limited-use lease by the former landowner. When I purchased this property 5 years ago, that lease expired. I've allowed you to continue using parts of the land in good faith, under the condition that the HOA not interfere with me or attempt to claim jurisdiction where it doesn't belong." My eyes met Karen's across the room. "That condition has been broken," repeatedly. She stepped forward, practically spitting fire. "You can't do this. This is illegal. The HOA has bylaws." I raised a hand. "I've reviewed your bylaws. They don't supersede property law. And before I came here this morning, I had my attorney file a formal notice of land use termination." I dropped a thick envelope on the podium with a satisfying thud. "Effective immediately, the HOA is no longer permitted to manage or restrict any activity on the portions of land I own. That includes the lake, the trails, and this clubhouse." I paused, letting that sink in. "You have 30 days to negotiate a new lease agreement with my legal team or vacate all buildings and common areas that sit on my land. If you fail to do so, you will be considered trespassers under state law." The silence was deafening. Karen, desperate and shaking now, pointed her finger like she was casting a curse. "This is outrageous. I'll sue you. I'll bring this to the county court. You'll regret this." I smiled, calmly, deliberately. "Feel free. But just a heads up, Karen." I leaned slightly closer and said it loud enough for the entire room to hear. "The county courthouse? It also sits on land I own." That one hit like a thunderclap. Gasps. One guy in the front dropped his coffee cup. A woman turned to her husband and whispered, "Is that true?" Karen went completely silent. For the first time, she looked around the room and realized no one was standing with her. Her kingdom had crumbled, and there wasn't a subject left willing to defend the queen. The residents began asking me respectful, even grateful questions. Some had no idea they were on borrowed land. Others apologized on behalf of the HOA. A few wanted to know what it would take to stay. I told them I wasn't trying to kick anyone out. I simply wanted boundaries respected, truth acknowledged, and peace restored. And I made it clear, if Karen remained on the board, negotiations were off the table. By the end of the week, she had been voted out unanimously. I didn't even have to ask. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The very next week, a special meeting was called by the HOA board. Several homeowners, clearly embarrassed by the 3 a.m. drama and the police visit, were demanding answers. Karen tried to hold her ground, claiming she was acting in the community's best interest, that I was a threat, and that the land ownership documents were probably fake. But by then, the truth had spread like wildfire. A few residents had even looked up the public land records online and confirmed everything I said. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The documents did it for me. By unanimous vote, Karen was removed from her self-appointed throne. No debates. No final words. Just a clear decision. Her reign of petty HOA tyranny was over. Later that week, I received a knock on my door. But this time, it wasn't Karen. It was two members of the newly formed HOA committee, holding coffee and paperwork, their faces sincere. They apologized profusely for the way I had been treated. We didn't know the full story, one said. Karen acted on her own. We want to work something out, respectfully. I appreciated the honesty. I wasn't looking for enemies. I just wanted boundaries respected. We sat down and worked out a new agreement. The HOA would be allowed to continue using the clubhouse and a small portion of shoreline, but under a strict lease. No policy enforcement on my land. No signage claiming control. And absolutely no interference with my cabin, my trails, or my lake access. They agreed to everything. Karen? She put her house up for sale within a month. Rumor has it she moved to a gated community 3 towns over, hoping for a fresh start. Hopefully one without lakes or independent landowners who don't tolerate nonsense. As for me, I still spend most weekends at the cabin. Mornings are quiet. I sip coffee on my dock with Max, cast a line into the lake, and watch the sun rise without a single shriek or complaint about my dog being off-leash. I don't get midnight knocks anymore. And even if I did, they'd be smart enough to check the deed before dialing 911. Moral of the story? If you're going to call the cops on someone, make sure they don't own the entire county first. So yeah, Karen tried to kick me off my own land, and ended up losing her HOA throne instead. Now I fish in peace, sip my coffee with Max, and haven't heard a single knock at 3 a.m. since. Let that be a lesson. Before you mess with someone, check the deed first. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss when another HOA Karen gets put in her place. Until next time, stay sharp, stay calm, and own your ground. Collision.